So welcome everyone. This is our last week of holding the webinars on Teacher Central for this school year. And so we decided to close with having teachers reflect on this process of distance learning, and so that we can learn as we move forward. And so we have selected, there's a panel of teachers from grades 3 through 5 who are joining us, and they're going to introduce themselves in a minute. I'm going to be moderating along with my colleague and friend, Mariam. She wants to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Mariam. I'm STEM coordinator for Network 3. Happy to see everyone.
Great. And I'm Erin Kogan, and I am the literacy coordinator for Network 4 schools. So we're going to go ahead and have the panelists introduce themselves. And if you could just say your name, your position, your school, and 1 to 3 words that describe what your distance learning experience has been like. So we'll start with Linda.
Hi, I'm Linda Green, and I teach elementary music at Cleveland Elementary and Thornhill. And 1 to 3 words: fast learning curve.
Thank you, Linda. And let's move on to Sam.
Sam Petty, East Oakland Pride, 5th grade, been there for 9 years. Let me think. I would say fascinating, frustrating, and communication.
Great, thanks. All right, Rose.
Hi, I'm Rose Chardak from CUES, Community United Elementary School. 4th grade teacher. 3 words. It just always evolving.
Okay. Thank you. And we have Deidre joining us.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Deidre Robinson, 3rd grade teacher, Walking Miller. And my 3 words, I had a few different ones, but this is what I'm going to come up with: emotional, hard, persevering.
Great, thank you. And Matt.
Hello, Matt Takimoto, currently wearing a flying squirrel costume for Spirit Week. 4th grade at Glenview, science, 4th grade science distance learning coordinator. And my words would be enlightening, inequitable, and uncertain.
Great, thank you. Is Jennifer here? No, Jennifer's not here. So Jennifer, 5th grade teacher at Bella Vista, is hopefully will be able to join us. So we are organizing this panel around 3 different kind of big topics. And so we're going to start with reflecting on your own learning. So Linda, if you could start us off by sharing what have you enjoyed most about being an educator during distance learning? And we're going to try to keep your responses to about 2 minutes. So Linda, you're up first.
Okay, well, what I think I've enjoyed the most is that I feel like I've been able to come up with really creative lessons that are things that I've always wanted to do but haven't been able to do. For instance, because I primarily teach violin, viola, and cello for the whole class at both of my schools. And so it's pretty much sticking to playing the instruments. It's been really great having my kids write blues lyrics and some different listening to different players and different techniques and different styles, and also thinking of ways to include the family in the lessons. So things that their younger brothers and sisters can participate with, and their parents and their older siblings, and also learning to make music and art in different ways that aren't just about your instrument. So using household items, which is, we talked about that last Monday, just finding things that you can use to make music with. And so something else that's a little bit, I don't know if my 2 minutes is close, but something that I find very interesting that I find that I kind of take a joy in is that I struggle with technology, because I remember when we first got a color television. I mean, it was like, whoa, it's color television. And I can empathize with students with learning difficulties in certain areas, because this is definitely not a strength of mine, using technology. So it sort of gives me an empathy for my students who might be struggling in some ways.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Okay, now Rose, so what have you learned most from this experience?
I mean, for myself as an educator, I really learned how to relearn patience. And as someone mentioned earlier, like, it's been a huge learning curve. Everything I thought I knew as a teacher was kind of, I started rethinking everything I thought I knew. I learned how important it was to have structure, how structure was going to look differently on distance learning. So moving into distance learning, really, at first I was like, okay, it's like, I know my kids, I know what they're good at, but everything's different, right? So setting up structure for both myself as the teacher, but also to support the students learning. I really learned, and this is different outside the class, but being consistent with like check-ins with families. I mean, during the regular school year, you know, you check in with the family in the morning, you see the family in the afternoon, sometimes you give them a call, but really having like times and days that I was dedicating to checking in and making sure everything was okay. Through the process, I learned how important that was in keeping students engaged and accountable for doing their work. I also just learned that, or I'm still learning that my students' work is not really defining me as an educator. So I learned to let go of little things that I can't control all the time, which in my own classroom, I'm more of a control freak, but I can't do that here. So just learning to let go and knowing that things will work out, hopefully.
Thanks, Rose.
Yeah.
All right, Deidre, what structures, resources, or tools did you find most successful during this distance learning time?
Mute myself. What structures you said?
Resources and tools did you find most successful?
Wow. When I think about the tools that I don't know if I can say if it was most successful. I think what was probably helpful, my students we had already started doing some online, but not to the level where I had to actually teach it. I think the tools that were successful is because I was able to do a pre-format with them as to how to get to the location. What I didn't attend to that I learned from this piece was that with online tools, it's not always easily transferable, especially if you're trying to teach it as a classroom teacher. And one of the biggest things that for me was more so missing was that transferring the online curriculum, transferring the curriculum online that you taught in the classroom was not an easy fix. And really coming up with something that I had not been exposed to a level of using my practice of what I've been trained for. So the tools online are helpful, but it just was a huge learning curve. And I think that's why I said that it was hard for me, because it was just not that I did not know how, it just was a learning curve. And then I had some really bad internet issues within my own home. And so I've been online with my students, and, you know, I totally froze, or I was cut off where they could hear me and I couldn't hear them. But one thing I have to say was successful is that my kids were with me. They were like, we can't hear you. They would start using the chat box, and they were, we'll help you, Miss Robinson. And so for me, that was successful, that we were working together, and I was constantly telling them about persevering and using self-management tools and being aware of each other while we were chatting. So we were learning together, and everything that I had taught to them about persevering and using self-management was coming to play. So maybe that was the success versus using the curriculum to actually teach, is that it is not normal, so you can't continue to teach it a certain way. But the hardest part was just really looking in their eyes and seeing where they're just as concerned and helping them. But I have to say, one good thing that did happen just recently is that I played a song that I always would have. It's called Happy, because I'm happy. And I used that at our Friday meetings, and the tool was really helpful for them. And one kid typed me back and said, you know, Miss Robinson, I remember hearing that all the time as a little kid, and I love that song. It made me so happy. And that was my takeaway as far as success, that those kids, it worked for some, but not all, but just me manipulating the tool.
Great, thank you, Deidre. Our sixth panelist is here. Jennifer, do you want to introduce yourself? And then if you wanted to add on anything about reflecting on your own learning during this process.
Hi, sorry, I was like in the waiting room. I was like waiting, it was gonna start. My name is Jennifer. I'm a 5th grade teacher at Bella Vista. And you know, I learned, I knew how to use the Google Classroom, and I had it set up already with my students, but I learned a few more tricks with it, I guess, you know, a few more features and a couple more strategies that I definitely want to continue even with whatever comes up next, but definitely wanted to, I guess that would be the biggest takeaway, is that I've learned some more ways to use Google Classroom.
We have a couple more minutes left in this section. Does any of the other panelists have any last thoughts on the reflecting on your own learning? And as you're thinking, I want to invite anyone who's joining us, if you want to, if you have a question for the panelists or have a comment, we're going to have a section at the end. So if you want to just add that in the chat as we're going through this, I see some people are adding some things in now. Feel free to add in the chat. Panelists, do you have any last thoughts on this section before we move on?
One more thing that I didn't mention before is that it's been really wonderful meeting with the other visual and performing arts teachers and getting to know them and sharing our struggles and our, you know, things that are going well. And that's something that's really amped up during this time. So we have a great coordinator as well, Phil Moradine.
Yes, I see. Sam?
Yeah, I just what everyone was saying, like, really like hits home in terms of like the creative freedom and like the need for communication, and also the way that we're learning a lot from each other. And for me, a big takeaway also was like, I think that the long distance platform thing we're trying is a really good idea, because the teachers are going to learn from each other in the same way like you would in a PLC at school. And so just thinking about how we can really raise attendance for next year, I think is going to be really important. Because I think a lot of the way teachers are going to improve are going to have to be from each other now, and structured around teachers learning from each other, and being able to pick and choose different things, and sharing strategies. And I think that's going to be super important moving forward. That's one thing I saw, was that most of the things I got was from teachers at my school, or having conversations with like my colleagues and whatnot. So we need to, I feel that's valuable.
Great, thanks. And Sam, you're referring to the Google Classrooms that we set up for each grade level, and the weekly PLCs that a lot of you panelists are helping to facilitate. So yeah, so thinking through how we can continue that and move forward as we move in. Thank you. All right, we're gonna move on to the next section around engaging the community. And so we'll start with Rose, you're up again. What have you heard from parents about how distance learning is going, and what are some things that you'd like to share?
So I have really wonderful parents. I feel really lucky. But, you know, when we started moving into distance learning, a lot of parents were really hesitant because of their own experience with school or lack of knowledge on how to use technology. I had a lot of parents who were really apprehensive to having their students even do the online work because they were like, I can't help them, right? But as we moved into, week 2, week 3, and with the constant checking in and walking parents through how to use Google Classroom or different structured systems I was using, parents were so thankful. I would get texts at night, like really late at night, from parents just being like, I'm so sorry to bother you. I know this is a burden, and feeling like they were asking for too much when really I was just doing my job. So parents were very thankful to have the support. I think a lot of them, when they heard schools were closing, a lot of our families thought, okay, school's out for the year, and didn't realize that teachers are going to continue working until the last day of school to support your students. So they were really appreciative. I think they pretty much just felt very valued and felt like their students' education was valued by the continued resources and support that teachers were giving them. So it was nice to have that communication with parents. And I was actually communicating with them a lot more than I would during the normal year. So that was nice as well.
All right, thanks, Rose. Matt, can you talk about what you heard, how your students' responses were to distance learning?
Yeah, I think the thing that struck me the most was it was almost like I had a different class of students via distance learning, and seeing how like student personality changes in an online platform versus in person. One of my most sort of outgoing, gregarious students, I actually had to have
Matt, we're having some trouble hearing you.
He'll be back in a moment. Sometimes his Zoom goes out.
maybe. There we go. Sorry. What I was saying was, one of my sort of most outgoing students in the classroom, I had a chat with her dad, and he was saying that she was like too anxious to even put the camera on during Zoom meetings. And, on the flip side of that, I have this like group of like really, really quiet students, like 3 or 4 of them, that all of a sudden, now that they're online and can like drop comments into Google Classroom or whatever, they're like the chattiest kids. So that's been really interesting. One piece of feedback that I got from my class was I've been teaching my lessons on YouTube. I've been live streaming them, and then after they live stream, they upload and publish to my channel. And I had a couple of kids who actually really liked that, because if they missed something, they could go back in the video and watch it again. And so that was really helpful, particularly for my kids who, I have one kid on a 504 for ADHD who has trouble kind of focusing and hanging in with more lecture-y type stuff. And so the ability to go back and replay parts of a mini lesson was super helpful for them. I think, one thing for the fall with my class that we've talked about is, I think a lot of my kids struggled with sort of the, nothing's required, but we should be doing something structure of everything. There are some kids who like want a really like rigid, like this is due on this date, because it gives them sort of a deadline. So I think, assuming in the fall, if we were to still have some sort of distance learning model that would be graded, it would be really helpful for students to sort of have more of that that kind of set structure and set deadlines with turning things in. I think is one piece of feedback I got.
Great, thanks. And Matt, you're going to continue on talking about how you were able to continue nurturing and building community with students while, in this world of distance learning.
Sure. One thing and one resource that I will plug that I got a lot of mileage out of was Flipgrid, in its ability to sort of have it felt a little easier to follow than like a whole class Zoom discussion where, you know, I did this with math where it was sort of number talky, where I'd post a question or a problem and have students explain their mental math strategy, and students could reply to their classmates with, oh, I like that strategy. And there were a lot of those same sort of discussion things of like, I agree with blank on this strategy, and I couldn't figure it out until I listened to blank's, you know, strategy. And so that was really cool. And they got a kick out of, you know, all the bells and whistles and emojis and things that come with Flipgrid as well. I also encouraged them to and did some supporting and like kind of finding little like study pockets and study groups, and creating, you know, I actually have a group of students who created their own like Instagram group chat for school questions, and they added me on it. And so then they could just quickly like pop in and like drop me an Instagram message if they had a question about an assignment. That was way faster than sending an email or sending a Google Classroom thing. And then they would also support and celebrate each other. They actually did a really good job of staying on task of like policing, like, hey, this is off topic, put it in the other group chat that we have without Mr. Taco. And so that was cool. And supporting students in sort of finding those kind of social circles in an online format to continue that both social, emotional, and academic support.
Great, thank you. All right, we're gonna move along, and I'm gonna turn it over to Mariam, who's gonna facilitate the next section.
All right, okay, I'm off mute. All right, so really the first part was really reflecting and just lessons learned. And now what we're moving along to looking ahead. So things like for next year. So we'll start with Sam. So Sam, what are you going to take from this and apply to next year, specifically when we are not in distance learning?
Well, I think that many people are really touching on things already. And for me, I've been looking at this as like, what insights do we have from this that now we can apply and form structures for next year? So taking these and turning them into structures over the summer to be ready to engage this. Like, so for example, Rose has mentioned a lot about family communication and the ways that that parents are appreciative of help with tech and this and that. Which, so like, what to me, a big thing I think is that next year, as a district and as specific sites, we should be thinking about what's our plan from day one for how we're going to do parent communication. Like back to school night, it's going to be completely different. Like, how are we going to have the parents be introduced to whatever their format for each class is? How will they understand the connection and the expectations? And so for me, like, part of what Rose was already doing and many other teachers were mentioning should now be structuralized and pre-planned and ready to roll at the beginning of next year. I think is what I really want to push at my site. I think also learning from teachers, changing the structure of PLCs at site, but also really emphasizing across the district the use of our platform we've created so that we can do things which is about deepening our own practice. So for example, when Matt's talking about Flipgrid and then how he's setting up a structure for academic discussion across videos, to me, that's taking resources and applying it to practice, which I think is going to be very important to create spaces for teachers to be able to do that. So that's what I'm going to be trying to talk about with the the PLCs in my site. And I think it should be a district, like, we should think about that. Another thing that I was really thinking about was that for me specifically, attendance it was a lot harder to get attendance where I wanted to be for live meetings and things like that. But I'm under the assumption that next year it's going to be, as tech is solved, expectations are going to be more rigid, I imagine, next year in the district. And I would like to know the answer to that question, because that'll affect the structures I would want to make. But assuming that the expectation is the kids are doing all the work at home now, that means we're going to have to create way more active and live, like, progress reporting systems for when kids fall off, and how we support parents and what we're offering in terms of like parents, here are optional meetings to learn about Google Classroom. Parents, here are optional meetings to learn about Flipgrid. And giving parents, because if they're going to be a tool to, I mean, they're going to be a teacher now. So we're going to need to be able to give them areas to really learn as well. And so I think just taking what Rose was saying about that and moving it forward. And then finally, at the very beginning, Linda was mentioning creative freedom and that feeling of being able to create things, which I think is very important moving forward, because we're not going to, first of all, a lot of these programs aren't going to be free next year. So we don't know what we're going to be able to rely on tech-wise, but also it's going to be more of a shift to live and more of a shift to us teaching from home as well. I imagine the teachers are going to be expected to do that more. So thinking about the project-based ideas and the ideas of how do you create more engaging activities, and how do you, like Deidre said, how do you try to make the teaching transfer to live is going to be important as well. And I think that there's going to need to be spaces for teachers to discuss that, you know, things like that.
Thank you, Sam. Deidre, you're up next. So really thinking of what was missing for you during distance learning that we need to collectively do some thinking around.
I think what was missing is the time to have teachers be brought up to speed with the training, because all those formats that were used, like Flipgrid, they have Seesaw, Padlet. There's a lot of great programs out there, but if you don't know how to use it, the time that it took to try to create lessons and a lesson plan and to kind of adapt to how long the kid should be online and not online, those are things that I think will be something that we have to really take time to look at. And it may be something, if we're starting on time or later, you know, maybe the district can look at what can we do to prepare teachers. Not all teachers are in the same space as well as far as learning technology. And then my problem I know how to use technology. The issues that I'm having is where I live, and having problems where, okay, I'm sitting in this part of my place and everything shuts down. So knowing how to troubleshoot those issues when it does occur, if we're using, say, district approved Chromebooks versus my own personal laptop. So those are the things as I look ahead, I would really like for some way for us as teachers to have the training, because every teacher is coming in at a different level, in a different space. I mean, I'm a veteran teacher, and I really felt like I was a fish out of water, and I actually know technology. So with that being said, there should be a format, because there are good tools that we can utilize the curriculum in Common Core and to have discussions with our students, but it's also the attendance and engagement, and then it becomes equity. So there's a lot of factors, but I think training, determining how that would look, you know, not everybody is good at YouTube. You know, I did YouTube and I did all the right things, and then none of my kids says, well, I can't access it, and all these comments. So we do have some formats that we have to kind of take place. So I'm hopeful, and I'm always saying hopeful, as to if this is a measurement, this is maybe another tool, like you teach your students, another tool and strategy that we'll be utilizing, whether they're in the classroom for this day or they're hybrid or pre-recorded, or things that we can kind of figure out how to do in the future. But I would just say Google Classroom, parents do not see what our students see. And I didn't know that. And so I think moving forward and looking ahead, just to provide those things in advance so that we are helpful instead of, you know, but then I did social emotional. I took my students from where they were, and my students that had special needs, they were actually more with me because I had a structure than those that didn't. I mean, so it's you know, and it's given me an opportunity as I reflect to looking at each student individually, where normally in a classroom of a normal size, you don't have that ability to look as individually as you would like to. Here, it's right in your face, you can see it. So I'm hopeful but definitely some training to help move it forward.
Yeah, we have a few more minutes for this. So if anybody, any of the panelists would like to add something, I see Sam, you want to just add something? We'll do like 2 more minutes in this and we'll move into the next question. Go ahead, Sam.
Oh, just really quickly on what Deidre just said, that's like the differentiation of what PLCs are needed is a lot wider now and also more specific. I know that at our site this year, we started doing optional, we just call them huddles, where we would offer things on like Flipgrid and this and that, and or we like ask teachers what they would want a little thing on, and then one of our TSAs we'd like would offer them on different days, and only every 3 or 4, maybe 5 teachers would join because they were optional. But then they got a chance to join the ones they wanted. But we had to change that structure. And so like just to add on what she was saying, like a lot of these new challenges would require like us to approach it with our own teacher training differently as well. Yeah, so I disagree with Deidre.
Go ahead, Rose.
Oh, sorry.
Sorry. I was muted.
I just wanted to add on, I heard a few people say it, but I think Sam mentioned just we need to be really proactive in the chance that this continues in the future. And so if we start off the school year just being proactive and planning for like training families on how to use Google Classroom or how to use these things at home, and making sure that all of our students have the resources they need ahead of time. I think that was the biggest problem, is everything, I mean, no one knew what was going to happen and everything was rushed, and it wasn't planned out or done in a timely manner. But now we have that time. So just something to think about.
Okay. Thank you, Rose. So next question. So Jennifer, you're up. So in an ideal world, what would you like support to look like from the central office while distanced?
I don't know if this is really practical, or what I'm thinking in an ideal world would be that there were some lessons, some units, I'm thinking of like science and math, where there's already the videos made. Like we have pre-made videos, especially for the teachers who, who maybe aren't, because like I'm good with the tech and everything. I don't want to be on YouTube. I don't want, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the person out there, but it would be nice if we had like just a library of resources we could go and pull from and just say, okay, I know this child needs help with this particular lesson, or they were missing this one or whatever. And then we could throw it up on our Google Classroom and say, we have this lesson here, you can go back and watch it again. Or, we did this lesson, we did this experiment in the classroom, but here it is also on Google Classroom, if we have like a hybrid method or whatever. And one of the questions that actually came up in our, one of our PLCs was, well, what would a reading workshop look like online? And so by having some pre-made lessons, people, new teachers, veteran teachers, anyone could benefit probably from seeing some quality, lessons that are already ready to go. And then maybe the goal would be that teachers then would say, oh, you know what, maybe I can do this. And then they just kind of take it over. Or especially at the beginning of the year when there's so much going on that, you don't have the time to sit and make a video and do your lesson planning and do this and do that, and so maybe if there were some that were just to get us started, that would be my ideal world, idea.
Thank you. So we have a few more minutes before we move into like the open forum and just throwing out questions and things that are coming up. But I guess it's a question to all of you teachers on the panel, that how has distance learning impacted what you're thinking about for the summer and ahead, looking ahead? We're still in this looking ahead. And so if any of you like to share, raise your hand. I'm looking. This is open to all of you.
I mean, I think it's super crucial to like have the teacher leaders and the admin kind of just like, it's gonna have to be, I mean, you're not gonna, it's like you have to like have the will to do it over the summer, but they're gonna have to like figure out, just like agree upon some structures, like on a loose format. It can be adjusted when we know what the specifics are later, and then just like pass out small tasks to the different people who are like willing to take them. Like, how can we tie in long distance incentives into whatever our school incentive system is already? Or is that equitable? Like, or how do you like, you know, how are we gonna, and just like start thinking about those things so that next year you can give them to the teachers and be like, this is the way we want it to be to go. And then you immediately can try to give that to the parents. I think it's gonna be crucial that the parents understand pretty much everything they need to in the first couple of weeks of school, and that requires the school to have understood what they want to do. So that's kind of what I'm planning. I'm planning on just trying to talk to all the different people at school and figure out who's on what, and then start just doing it.
Rose?
I'm thinking of, and this is just my personal plan, but I'm going to keep my Google Classroom kind of going throughout the summer. I mean, I'm going to be working anyway, so it's just a little more, but I mean, just keeping the students engaged. There was so much missed learning these last 2 months of school, and thinking about what August and September are going to look like for them when they're back in school. So that's something I'm planning on doing personally. I wouldn't expect every teacher to do that. However, I'm here to support if anyone's interested. But also looking ahead, I'm wondering, as a teacher at my site, how to kind of get everyone on the same page, right? Like, we're working together across the district, which is wonderful. And I've had a really great experience working with my 4th grade team and meeting people through the RPLCs, but just thinking ahead about if we have distance learning, how to get the whole school kind of on the same page, maybe using the same program so that there's consistency across grades, so that we could work together to make it as beneficial. I think we kind of rushed into this March 13th when we got that email, right? But now we have the time to think about what it could look like with a little more planning. So that's kind of where I'm at. Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna move into our last part. Oh, is that Matt? Sorry, is that Matt?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, so one last thing on that.
Okay, go ahead.
Just one on that, just science specific, and really thinking about what is science instruction going to look like in all of these different models, and really putting out there, particularly in terms of if we need to get materials to homes for remote investigations, versus some sort of like, you know, what are the like the halftime or small group model where we could theoretically do investigations in the classroom and then have sort of the writing portion of the notebooking component coming afterwards. But really thinking about, I think science took a big hit because we lost the hands-on piece. So how do we get that back in a remote area?
Thank you, Sam. Okay, for this last part, it's just the open forum, and just questions are coming up. If we do have, Erin is taking a look at the chat in a minute, so we'll be responding or looking at some of the feedback that's on the chat. If anyone would like to share or, you know, something related to those questions, please volunteer on the chat, and then we'll just kind of call people as we go. But this is pretty much open, and if teacher panelists want to respond or other issues or other things they thought came up, go ahead. So Erin, what are we seeing on the chat?
Yeah, a lot of there's discussions. A lot of people have put comments. If anyone wants to share one of their comments or questions, if you could just type it in the chat so I know that you want to speak up, that would be great. A lot of people are interested in the consistency of platforms. What tools will we continue to use, and how can we get to a place where we are consistent, especially, you know, I'm hearing, you know, for our students, right? So they're learning the tools that they can use, and our families, and so not overwhelming them with so many different tools. Trying to see if there's any. Okay, so Wes Jacques is joining our chat, and he wants to know from the panelists, so what worked for you this year in terms of structuring a weekly schedule? And how might we apply these ideas if we end up in a hybrid context? So if anyone on the panel wants to kind of talk about your scheduling and what you're thinking about as we think about possible hybrids.
I'll share. For me, I know that we did a daily Zoom meeting with the whole fifth grade group. So that was like 59 fifth graders. We ended up only getting an average of about 30 fifth graders every day. But having like that, like a lot of kids in there, it made it feel like, oh, this is something we have to do. So that's how we were able to maintain that amount. So in a hybrid, I don't know how we would do that, because the teacher, of course, would be in the classroom every day. So as far if it was just distance learning, then I think having a set time, same time, every day, we did something. But then one other thing we did is that we had a daily writing prompt. And so every day, so having something due every day made them go to the Google Classroom every day to look at stuff. So having like a consistent, like every day something is due. To me, that I think really had a lot of accountability put on the students.
Sam?
Yeah, to add on to that, I was really wondering about that as well, Jennifer, like what would be get more participation. And so I was doing weekly math and science units, as well as like a daily 5 math, which was like 5, just, you know, keep your procedural skills sharp type problems. And what I noticed was that the daily work had a higher percentage of completion, you know, between like 60 to 70%, as opposed to like 40 to 50% for the weekly work. And what I realized was that if you're going on the weekly work route, with the video meetings that I had, like I noticed that kids who didn't join the video meetings on Monday or Tuesday really very rarely finished the weekly work. Because if it was building on it, like if it was building on like a concept of deforestation or whatever, by the second or third day, you know, they must have felt overwhelmed already. So like just thinking about how I'm trying to do that later, it's like what extra supports would be needed if we were trying to go like weekly little units as opposed to daily work. It required different things and different engagement levels is one thing I noticed.
Rose?
Yeah, if I can just add in, for me personally and my students, I noticed when I would have like live lessons and I would tell them ahead of time, like we're going to be meeting at this time to go learn this, I would get just a handful of students, and then I would get a bunch of texts and messages about, oh, I couldn't come, I missed it. So what I started doing was kind of recording myself, posting it, right, so that they have the lesson, and they could check it, you know, when they have access to their mom's phone, or you know, when they're at home and have the computer in front of them. And it wasn't, I kind of realized through the process that not all of them are going to be sitting in front of a computer 9 to 5 like I am, and to be a little more flexible with that. And then I started seeing a lot more students doing the work because they were able to watch the lesson at a later time. And what I started doing is on like Friday mornings, we would do class check-ins about like throughout the week questions that came up. And that would be more of the live interactive, like, how can I support you? Or what questions do you have about what came up this week? So that's what worked for me.
Go ahead, Erin.
I was just noticing that Marcela is joining us, who supports PE, and just wondering if Marcela, you wanted to talk a little bit about PE, or if other teachers have talking about something that came up yesterday was about all the other enrichments and how we can incorporate them in a weekly schedule. So Marcel, did you want to speak at all?
Yes, hi, thank you again for having me. So in terms of our reaching our students in PE, and right now I'm supporting all of our PE teachers K through 12, we really are all across the board. Some are very interactive with Zoom meetings and kids are up and moving. Some are assigning students to watch YouTube videos. And then some assignments are do what you can, create a log what you can do. But I really want to know kind of, are there plans in place on how we really can ensure that we are reaching our students, that they really are getting the minutes that they need to be physically active and mentally healthy? I know it's a dialogue that will continue, but I just want to put it out there to everyone. Thank you.
It's a similar problem we're having in the arts, just fitting it in the consistently in the schedule, so that it's, especially with, I feel like with all the different teachers, I work with 11 different teachers and they're using different platforms, just trying to reach all the families and then reaching all the students to on a Zoom meeting is really difficult because all the teachers are sending out the information in different ways. And so it'd be great if there was more consistency in the ways that we're reaching our students.
I just want to add that something that we've been partnering with is on the distance learning Google Classrooms for each grade level, that we have added sections for, you know, physical education. Also, there's the gardening and nutrition section. And so we're trying to, you know, add those into each Google Classroom so that teachers have those resources, but definitely more, you know, work needs to be done around that consistency and how we build it into a schedule that teachers can, you know, can access and make work, I guess.
I think some of you answered, I think somebody answered this already, but I know there was a question about which platforms worked the best across like contents. I mean, Flipgrid has been mentioned for different contents. It's been mentioned right here. David mentioned that Flipgrid has PE challenges. So maybe the panel can speak briefly as to where they saw the tool that actually worked cross content, the hands-on. I see Matt. Go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I really liked, I think Sam said it earlier, I can't remember, but really thinking about all the different tools and resources we have in terms of function, like what function do they serve? Like Google Classroom, you know, is one sort of central hub for classwork and blah, blah, blah. It doesn't necessarily have to be the hub that we use, but I think having a central location for assignments and turning in work and grading work is really important. Likewise, having like a go-to live meeting format, whether that's Zoom or Google Meet or whatever, and then also, and so, you know, I like Zoom. I don't know if we're going to continue to have sort of like the premium features on it next school year. I don't know if OUSD is interested in buying that, or if we're going to switch to Google Meet. And yeah, I think having, you know, whether it's Flipgrid or Padlet has been talked about as a really good one as well, as sort of a way for students to share and get that student voice out there that isn't just like a live discussion. I think those three components really helped me. You know, I think the one other thing I'm thinking about was like whether it's Freckle or Seesaw or what have you, it's kind of like
a multi-subject like content platform. My class particularly didn't like Freckle as much, but I think having somewhere with a lot of different options to choose from, I think was helpful there too.
Jennifer?
I have a whole list of them. For like presenting, Nearpod is awesome because you can get live feedback and it's interactive with the students. So as you're presenting a lesson, students can draw or take a quiz or respond to questions, and then so it's interactive and it's live, or you can assign it for work later. And that's across the board. You can use, and they already have some pre-made stuff. You know, you can make your own Nearpod, or you can use one that's already made for you. And then of course Kahoot, because it's fun and the kids love it. We already talked about some of them. And then ST Math and Raz Kids are also good. But Nearpod's my favorite.
Anything else you see on the chat, Erin? We have about 2 more minutes. We have to wrap it up.
Done a pretty good job. There's Deidre, did you want to add what you were saying?
So we do have a question for the panel. So how are you all thinking about teaching your grade level content next year and accelerating student learning so you don't have to reteach all of this missed content from the previous year? That's a question for the panel.
I'll speak. I think about that as far as, what have my students lost? And when I think back of when everything kind of happened, third grade, we were prepping for SBAC. And so we were finishing up our interims and we were actually moving forward to testing, which would have happened straight after our spring break. And so for me, my concern is not so much as what they've lost. I don't think they've lost hot. What my concern would be is kind of like the lack of summer. In the summer, kids not doing anything. So because we could not really do dates for work that we've had to give them, there has been a lag. And so the biggest part is determining, like, when kids usually come back in the fall, there is lag. I don't think it's going to be a huge lag unless those kids that parents were essential workers or just didn't have the bandwidth. I've had parents that tell me, I don't have the bandwidth. We moved, I'm an essential worker. I'm doing what I can. I still have my child working in your workbook and, doing this piece, but I can't do Google Classroom or I cannot do Clever Portal. So when I think about moving ahead, I don't really look at our kids losing so much. I really just look at what we're dealing with is not normal, and that they are providing that space and that grace for where they are. That will come back, just like if we think of trauma. It's somewhat trauma in a sense. And so, yes, we still need to teach them what they need to learn, but I don't look at them as missing a whole bunch. I look at those that were struggling before this happened as being a possible huge problem. And if we look at those students that are coming back first, then we can kind of manage those that are coming back as if it was a normal situation, what loss might have occurred, just based upon summer learning and just based upon, because we're at the last month of school, which were, field trips, going to review, going over new projects at the end of the year. So I figured, like, at this point, and maybe that's just in my mind, it's something that I don't think they've lost a lot. I think if we present it and have something that's consistent and allowing them that space, they will be okay, because our kids are resilient.
Sam, just a final few minutes.
Just to answer that question as well. to me, it goes back to structure again. I mean, once we know what the breakdown of like, if we'll be a little bit at school and at home, there's going to be decisions to be made. For example, let's say math. If we have 3 days at school and 2 days at home, are the 2 days at home for like more review, procedural fluency work that parents are more able to deal with? And then we're focusing on more depth, power standards, depth of knowledge type project-based stuff at school? Are we starting with really getting a conceptual foundation down at school and then trying to have them do independent work at home? So it's going to be really important to be strategic about what we're doing at home and what we're doing at school, if that's what once again, it all depends on what the situation is. But then that also means that whatever we are counting on doing at home, we have to provide some sort of avenue of training for the parents. It can be optional, obviously, it can't be forced. But if we're going to have them be doing something, the parents need to understand how, and because as Rose has said, and I've experienced, the majority of parents are very open and appreciative of that if they have the time. And if not, we look for other avenues. But to me, the big answer is that we're going to have to decide very specifically what is going on. It can't just be go on Zern and do 3 hours of work. It has to be way more intentional than that moving forward and really combining it in an effective way to help catch up is what I think.
Okay, Matt. Just 1 minute, Matt. Is that okay?
Yeah, I need 20 seconds. I think this, Sam's point just brings me back to like the big thing of like, teachers need to know what school is going to look like in August as soon as possible so we can start planning for it. So like that, I mean, that's the biggest district ask than anything. Like, I know there's uncertainty, but like, I think we would rather have an early announcement so we can start planning than hold on and see what the landscape looks like in late July when it's too late to put anything concrete together.
Thank you, Matt. All right. Well, it's been really great hearing all the reflections that you have kind of shared, and as well as like what you're thinking for next year. It's helpful for us. There's many people from Central and this participants today to hear what are the needs for support. As we wrap up today, first we want to thank you, the panelists, for making it today. We really appreciate all the work you've been doing. And we wanted to close just by asking each one of you to say 1 to 3 words, because it's already noon, that describes what you're excited about as we head into next year. And so I think I can pick people, or can anybody volunteer first, and then I'll go from there. Is anybody ready with their 3 words? Jennifer, you seem ready.
I'm actually excited about small groups.
Great, thank you. Okay, I'll go Deidre.
Hi, I'm sorry. I got kicked off. My computer said that it was one of the few things that the problems I've had. My 3 words, I'm excited. I'm excited about applying new things that I've learned and actually having think time to reflect on how I can possibly make sure it's equitable across the board, and to allowing my kids that space to still grow with all the different things that have occurred to them. Longer than 3 words, sorry.
That's okay. Thank you. Linda.
I'm excited about having my students explore their creativity in the arts, like whether it's music or the other area, dance or whatever. So with things they have around their house.
Thank you. Rose?
I'm excited not to start at 0, to build off of where I've been.
Thank you. Sam?
Adapting to changes.
And Matt?
I'm excited to see the resiliency of my students coming back, and I'm excited for the election.
Well, thank you, panelists, and thank you, participants, for being here today. Aaron and Kelly, final words.
Yeah, I just thank everyone. You know, it's been amazing to be able to work and see how how you guys have been so resilient during this time, and the way that you have stepped up to this challenge. It's, you know, I really applaud you all, and I'm so in awe of everything you guys do. So thank you for being part of this panel. Thank you for everyone who's joined the panel. Lots of great things to think about and we need to do as we move forward. So thanks.
Thanks, everyone. Fantastic job, panelists. Really appreciated hearing from you. And thanks to everyone for joining today. We really appreciate all of your hard work and your dedication to your students. So we are just a little bit past time, so we'll be signing off. Have a great day.
Bye, guys. Thanks.
Thank you again.